Welcome to LFG with JJ, the podcast that helps you level up your CX game by navigating CX and AI technologies. I'm Juan J. Singh, the CEO of Zingtree, the AI-powered customer experience platform providing solutions that turn every human into an expert. 700 plus companies across 54 countries trust our solutions to boost their contact center proficiency, enable their customers to self-help, improve their internal processes, and more with Zingtree. Ted, great to have you here. Thanks for taking time. Today is President's Day. I don't know if it's an official holiday for you, but it's an important day, and you're here with me. So thank you for joining the LFG with JJ podcast. Ted, you've been in the customer experience space for over 30 years, almost close to 40 years, I believe. You've got a ton of great experiences. So excited to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Juan. It's scary to hear 40 years of doing anything. It makes me sound really old, but it's true. Yeah, a lot of time in the CX space.
Great. So, you're officially the head of global consumer experience and SVP of SharkNinja now. You've had a ton of other experience as well, which we'll get into today. So let's jump right into it. For today's agenda, we'll talk about your background, even your personal, professional background, what you're comfortable sharing, how you got to where you are now. And then second, we'll talk about, your experience in the CX space, what's happening in the industry. You've seen it over multiple decades, and a lot of things have changed. I was seeing a post today about how Air Canada got in trouble for their chatbot not working, and the court ruled against them. It was a funny post on LinkedIn about it, where the consumer won in the Canadian court. So I'm sure you have a lot of views on everything that's been going on in technology over the last few decades. And then also, spend some time talking about, what you're seeing in your job, but, everything that's going on with AI, next-gen tech. And then we can wrap up with, some of the fun stuff you do outside of job. So that's the plan. Let's jump right into it, Ted. Who is Ted? I would love to learn a little bit about you. Where did you start your, career, or how did you get into, this type of career that you started at Marriott in the customer service organization? So I'd love to hear a little bit about your personal, professional background.
Sure. Oh my gosh, your TED story really is what you're asking for. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So I was in the kind of that transition from high school to college, and needed to make some money, and didn't want to work in a car wash anymore. I've been working in car wash for 4 years, like part-time.
Was that your first job, first paying job when you were?
Yeah. It was a car wash, and then I did like outbound telemarketing as
Where did you
well,
grow
which
up?
paid.
Where was this?
That was in Omaha, Nebraska.
Yeah.
But the outbound telemarketing was something I was unfortunately really good at, and I hated every second of it, and I wanted out of that as well. So I got somebody told me about this job at Marriott, and I went out to the call center, and I got a job and started working there. It was, I think initially it wasn't even full time, because I think I was still doing one of the other jobs, but it just became a full-time gig, and then it lasted 30 years.
So this is
So it was
what,
a
when
long
you were
time.
like 18, when you're transitioning?
18. Yeah.
So is it
Yeah.
common for having like customer service entry-level people who are mostly, I've seen them mostly being around 22 when they're just getting out of college. This is kind of like their first job. But is it common to have 18-year-olds getting into this field?
No, no. I think
Yeah.
I was one of the exception. And I think the reason that Miriam, I don't think I was some amazing human. Like they were like, oh my God, hire this really young guy. I think it was they were primarily trying to hire people to work nights and weekends, and you only can find so many of those people. And 18-year-olds are willing to do that. So I think
Yeah.
it just, it kind of worked out really well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's great. And then you were doing this because I remember I did some cold calling when I was in college, when you were, bugging your alumni to donate back to your school.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
doing that's kind of more common for folks who are between the age of 18 to 22. So you were in and you were doing schooling around this time, so you had your regular school hours, and then any free time you had, you were working in the Marriott call center.
Yeah, indeed. And kind of like you, I did the cold calling thing before that. And I, I hated that. Like it just like that works for some people. It's a great fit. For me, it again, it was not a horrible, it was not a good fit for me, but it was a great fit for the company because I was really, really good at doing that work. I just hated it. Hated every minute of it. Yeah,
It's a tough that's a tough job as well, you know,
it is.
customer
Yeah,
service jobs are really hard, like, as you know, and then outbound telemarketing is extremely hard, a lot of no's, a lot of hangups. So, you know, you've been in, you've, grinded your teeth in different, you know, jobs that have, high pressure and, low satisfaction. But
indeed. Yeah, indeed.
That's great. So then how did you evolve, from, you know, it's just really interesting because, you know, I've spoke to a lot of CX leaders like yourself, and it is amazing to see how pretty much most of those folks I've talked to started their careers, not as young as you did, but started their careers in call center. They were taking calls themselves.
I was working nights and weekends primarily, and then that kind of shifted into day work and a couple of like movements, but really it was all in this frontline entry level reservations work. And I actually enjoyed it. It was nice, like when you were done helping a customer, you were done. There
Yeah.
wasn't any follow-up headaches. You didn't have to like 50 things. It was like you were done and you just took the next thing, right? It was a really nice setting. And then I don't even remember how this happens. You usually have somebody tap you on the shoulder because you're a subject matter expert, and they're like, I need you to be like the quote unquote supervisor on Saturday. And then, by the way, babysit these other 6 humans, and we're not going to train you or help you with that. It was one of those scenarios, right? Like just kind of help. And I thought, okay, yeah, I'll give it a try. And it worked out really well. And it wasn't that long before it was like a permanent promotion into this supervisory role. And then all of these other things just kind of kept happening at work. At that time, Marriott was growing really quickly. And so it just provided these endless opportunities that would just present themselves with people. And somehow I think I did a pretty good job of creating a good brand for myself within the contact center. So folks were like, hey, that Ted guy, you can count on him. So all of a sudden, one day they were like, we want to create this today we would call it like tier 2 or tier 3 group
Right.
for problem resolution. And for a select group of Marriott brands. So the Marriott brand itself already had a group, but they wanted, and so they just asked me to do it. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And then all of a sudden that business was just growing exponentially and my team was growing quickly. And then I actually grew into kind of like this Uber role with all the brands underneath my portfolio and all the issues and even issues for Marriott executives. So we were handling issues for Mr. Marriott on his behalf, which was really kind of a cool part of the job. And um, from that, I just kind of kept promoting within Marriott, and I did some site selection work for years and opening up contact centers and closing them. And then had this really cool role for, gosh, I don't know, like 7 or 8 years, Joanne, of opening, closing, and running contact centers all over the world. It was just like the best job ever. So, one minute you're in Mexico City, and then you're in London, and then you're in Cape Town, and then you'll do a stop off in Kuala Lumpur. And it was great. And you couldn't do it for a better company than Marriott. Marriott's a great group to work with. Number one, but they have really good travel benefits for employees. So
So
you
do you
travel
get free I
well
was
on
gonna ask you,
top
do
of
you
it.
get free rooms or do you have to pay, like, a very discounted rate? How does that work?
Well, when you travel on business, obviously, they're just expense, but as an employee, you
Yeah.
get discounted rooms. And then for folks who work for the company for 25 years or more, there's a special program
Wow.
where you get benefits for the rest of your life. So
Wow.
that's a nice thing.
It's
Yeah.
like working for the government and, but it's still private sector and you get, you know, great benefits, sounds like.
Yeah, it really is. It's great stuff.
That's awesome. Was there a moment in time so that's amazing that you were able to, you know, you started out with someone that's asking you to help and you took upon yourself to
Yeah.
them out, and then it just evolved into you managing more people and running call centers and transforming call centers and, you know, setting up and opening call centers and all that great stuff. So was there like a aha moment for you where you felt at there's, you know, whether it could be the early start of your career or during the middle of your career at Marriott, that you felt like, wow, okay, I've got my path here. I'm becoming expert. I love what I'm doing, and this is how I'm going to continue to evolve.
Yeah,
Maybe a mentor or someone who something that made you feel like, okay, hey, I'm gonna make it here.
I had a lot of really amazing bosses. So I couldn't even like point at one. I think some of us are just lucky in life, where you kind of go from one great boss to the other, who help promote you, develop your skills, maybe have a little bit of fun as well. And but I had one boss, who very specifically kind of had this conversation with me in my career of because I'd also done some software development, and
Yep.
I really kind of needed to make a decision. Like, was I going to go down this kind of IT-ish software development kind of road,
Yep.
or was I going to stick with the kind of contact center customer service person? And I made that decision. Like, I'm like, I don't want to write. Like, I don't want to write code. That's not going
Yep.
to be my thing. And the interesting part was so much of that work from so many years were really contact center leader roles, but really the part of the job that always kind of energized me was being the consumer advocate. So always being that guy talking about, well, no, 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 this process in the company is horrible, or wait a minute, this system stinks because they create really bad consumer experiences, right? And so that's always been the piece that drove me. Even when I was in software development, I started doing nighttime courses and got certified to develop because I was trying to just solve some consumer issues that consumers were really having really bad experiences. And I
Yep.
was like, I'm just going to go find a way to fix them. And so I think that's always been the driver, Jawan. I think some people enter this field kind of processy, and for me, it's more of it's almost like a religious calling. It's like a doing the right thing, doing what people should do. It's what companies should do. The value proposition of you take really good care of your consumers and they'll take really good care of you by buying stuff. That's almost secondary in my mind. It's there. The primary driver is doing the right thing.
That's awesome. I'm glad you said that. That's so hard to do. There's another funny post I'd seen recently where it said, "Hey, customer service is a number one priority for our company." That's what most companies say, unless when it gets really hard, really expensive. you know, that was kind of like a funny thing because it is hard to do the right thing over and over again, and that's a great mindset to have. Hey, let's do the right thing, and maybe it may not sometimes show up short term, but long term, that's always it's always been a winner. So when you do the right thing over and over,
Yeah.
that's
And
great.
I don't think the right thing is always spending money or vast amounts of it or being crazy with it. And I'm going to use an example if I can.
Of course,
In
please.
a past role, I was doing work with our marketing team about, these loyalty points that are earned in the company. And this was not at Marriott. Um, and the confusion is everything they put on paper and kind of the guiding rules of the program, and then what actually happened if a consumer contacted the CX organization and said like, I lost my points last month because they expired and I demand them back,
Yeah.
and the CX organization just had this policy they just gave people back their points anytime they called. So we had this like constantly reoccurring program process where huge volumes of consumers were writing and calling and just saying, I want my points back. And I approached the marketing team in this work that we were doing and said, well, this is stupid. And they're like, well, your team wanted to do it. And I'm like, well, I don't know what happened in the past, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's a really good consumer experience to have this huge disparity between what you state and then what you do,
Yeah.
because it's just confusing. So if your points expire, they should expire.
Yep.
And if they don't expire, they don't have them expire. And then if they expire, that you have some reasonable, fair way to deal
Yeah.
with consumers. And so we put together a different program. We said, we're not going to give you your points back anymore because that defeats the purpose of the program. But
Yep.
what we will do is we will make one exception for you one time every year. And we
Yep.
were very open about that with our consumers. We're happy to make one exception for you one time every year, and was very reasonable. And then we had these kind of like extenuating circumstances exceptions, Juwan. So like literally we had consumers who were like had been hospitalized for a year. And for those cases, like those extreme
Yep.
notable things, we had a process by where we dealt with them. And the thing was initially some folks were really mad with that change. And they're like, no, I want you to always, and we're like, well, but that's not the program, right?
Yes.
So no. And so even, and by the way, after, you know, a good 60 days, nobody complained about it anymore. It wasn't an issue anymore. And it stopped all this crazy confusion with consumers. So I don't think that there's this belief, or there shouldn't be, that good service has to cost a lot of money, or you have to be crazy and stupid with things. I think sometimes those great examples are wonderful to excite the troops, or to tell a story, or to demonstrate a commitment the company has. Those are amazing. And at Marriott, we had so many of them, and they're needed. But I think
Yeah.
on a day-to-day practical basis, you really need like just a reasonableness with consumers. And generally that works, I have found. So that fairness, that great service is just kind of reasonableness.
Yeah, I mean, like, listen, I mean, you and I are consumers all the time, so we get to experience this every day. You're 100% right. I mean, yes, would I love if my points didn't expire, if I, got some free service? I'm sure I would. At the same time, having clarity, simplicity, directness, and, knowledge that is shared with me, is something that I would appreciate and respect, even if I didn't get what I wanted. And that's happened to me multiple times where, and a lot more, being in the CX space, I see that and I recognize that, and I wasn't in the CX space, I'd be very upset on the phone. Hey, this person's not giving me the right information. This person's not is making me run around in circles. But now I understand the work that they're in, the challenges that they face, and maybe they don't have the right tools in front of them. So I always tell them, hey, I'm not upset at you. You as an individual trying to do your
Right.
best job, but I'm really, trying to get to the finish line. And I think your company's not empowered you with all the right things to help you do your job well.
Right.
But that's
And
okay.
even,
I'm still frustrated.
yeah, I think I honed some of those skills at Marriott, though. At Marriott, you know, it was great having all these opportunities to go into positions and try things and experiment. And one of them was, again, you know, consumers and their requests for exceptions. And we had this very nice, simple process that, again, I think most reasonable people would say, okay, that's fair. You'll do something for me once a year. But we also had a policy for people like yourself who travel a lot, platinum members, where we had a different policy. And again,
Ambassador. I'm an ambassador.
there you go. You're an
Yes, I
ambassador.
got
And
the
so
highest level now.
there's things that happen to you that are taken care of that you don't ever need to know about, and that's beautiful. That's part of the secret. But there's also things they're quite candid about, like if you need exceptions to the cancel policy made, that they're like, you know, Juan, we'll do so many a year for you,
Yeah.
right? Like that's reasonable. And even a standard traveler who isn't the status you have, if they learned about that, they would kind of go, yeah, that's reasonable. Juan travels a lot. He should get more exceptions to it. So I think that to me is what great service is. It's this reasonableness in the expectation where, you know, when you're on an airplane, you don't have to pay to use the toilet. When you're on an airplane, you get some standard things, right? They're still going to give you water, but you may not get a free
Depends on
cocktail.
the
And I think
airline. Depends on the airline.
indeed, indeed. And so I think these are some of the things of great service doesn't have to be, you know, somebody carrying you onto the airplane. It
Yeah.
could be this experience that with the standard things were delivered over and over and over really well.
Yeah.
And that means a lot to people because most, particularly travelers, most days in their life, most things don't go as expected. Most things don't work as they should. And so just having things work with a company the way that they should is really powerful.
That's great. So, we're getting into the CX space here. And, from the conversation I've had with you and, and your team as well, they respect some of the, things that you say is around, frictionless experience, seamless experience. And, that is also important. And I think that's something that you harp on a lot. I've heard you say that in various different meetings. We want to make this, seamless. We want to make this frictionless, for the consumer. So, would love to just peel back a little bit and talk about the CX industry, right? Like the state of the union. You've been a leader in the CX space for a while. What is your view on where our industry is, now where it's heading? Would love to get your thoughts, around that. And maybe some of that will be around this, frictionless experience that you talk about a lot.
Yeah. Um, I'm always blown away when I talk to either someone in my organization. I'm on a couple of advisory boards with CX organizations. If I just talk to a colleague in this space, when they start to create processes or they approach a problem from the company's needs perspective. And I even have this in my role today where I'm encountering it, where we make like a frontline CX advocate jump through all these hoops so they can inform some back end process that nobody's paying attention to anymore. Or they ask the customer 6 questions. I recently came across an example where we had in a particular market, we were asking consumers these kind of filtering questions before we even got to really what the consumer was calling about.
Yeah.
All effort filled. I mean, crazy amounts of effort. And again, I think it's because I spent so much time in the hospitality space where the question my team and I had to answer is, well, what do people really want? And it's funny because it's not complicated, Joanne. Like when we like kicked it around, it's like they really want you to say, hi, thank you for calling Bill in the company. My name is Ted. How may I help you? And then to just shut up. And like that's really powerful. When was the last time a company just said, hey, Joanne, thanks for calling, Marriott. How may I help you? And then
That's
just
really
listening to you. That's
powerful.
really powerful.
That's really powerful you say that because, what is unique is you work for a global consumer product brand now, SharkNinja. But that is really unique because you come from a hospitality background, service oriented, right? It's service oriented background, and you're always serving in that hospitality industry. And that view, I can see that being very powerful in any role that you take, and definitely powerful in a consumer product role, and like being service minded when a call comes in, and like you said, like, hey, my name is Ted. I see you're a VIP customer, Shark Ninja. Thanks for purchasing this, Ninja smoothie machine last week. How can I help you?
We just rolled it out at SharkNinja. So we've had this kind of part of who we are.
Yeah.
But again, as you grow, and we've grown so quickly as a company, things kind of start deviating from that standard. And we've had this real big push. And we've been really successful when we kind of check in on it and see how we're doing. We get really good scores where our frontline CX advocates literally say that, thank you for calling Shark. My name is Ted. How may I help you? And then just listening. And then we did the same thing at the end. So all we want to do is make sure when we're done with this conversation that you kind of think like, oh, well, that was nice. And we just say, thank you for calling Shark. We don't ask you 6 times, is there anything else? Is there anything
Yeah.
else? Can I help you with anything else? Can I help you with anything else? This kind of craziness, or I'm going to do a survey. Make sure you give me a 9, and all of these odd things when really all I wanted to do was say thank you for calling. And that's a really powerful statement. So I think these two things, like we start that conversation by introducing ourselves and listening, and then we end the conversation by wishing you a good day, right? Or the rest of the day, or just thank you for calling. I hope other companies kind of pick up on these things when they shop the competition or they shop other industries and kind of see, well, what are folks doing out there? And I'd love us to be setting the standard of this really simple delivery of these basic things are very powerful and that
Yeah.
we do them very well.
It's just amazing, like all the stuff you learn and you hear. It's all basic, simple things, but they're hard to execute. And I feel like I'm
Right.
hearing the same here. These are like basic, simple things, but they're really hard to execute. And that's, it's kudos to you and your team to, executing. And it shows in the growth of Shark Ninja, right? You guys have been crushing it in the numbers. Huge growth both in the US and internationally, globally. So congrats to you guys on that. So how do you see, you're talking about growth, with growth that comes, sometimes there are some challenges, good challenges, right? With growth. So the fast-paced growth that you guys all have, how do you see, let's say maybe AI or next gen tech, supporting your, initiatives? There's a lot going on with, obviously we all know a lot going on with AI. With that said, a lot going on in AI in the customer experience, customer support space is, a lot of people think it's the low-hanging fruit. What is your view on that? How are you guys thinking about that? Whatever you can share would be helpful.
Are you thinking, Joanne, just like technology in total and how it's being applied or
I
anything
think
in
technology in
particular?
total, maybe, some examples within, your work, whatever you're comfortable
Yeah.
sharing.
I started kind of playing in this realm about 5, 6 years ago now. So I think when it was earlier in its development, from what most people like, most people can trace this back in probably the last 12 months, a lot of talk about it, but it's been a topic for a while. And
Sure.
I talked with some of the like most amazing engineers at I won't it's a large software company. I won't say their name, but amazing engineers when I was trying to learn about it, and they shared something really powerful to me that applies still now as it did then. Is they said, don't try to solve everything with technology, one, but two, with AI. As you approach this, have really, really simple, clear use cases that you're going to attack, and then just evolve that over time as the marketplace changes, as technology changes. Because what they had learned from their own experimentation, as well as working with some companies, was where this worked, both for the company and the consumer, was when things were clear. So in my last role, we did work underneath that guidance. And we said, how can we just give order status, shipping status updates really easily to a consumer when they call in
Yep.
using AI? And the results were phenomenal. Now,
Yep.
some people may go, yeah, but you'd be amazed at the number of companies that, don't deliver that today, or struggling to deliver that today, or it's a very structured conversation versus using AI. So we were really successful at saying, hey, Joanne, is that you calling from this number? And you're like, yeah.
Yep.
And then we're like, hey, we see you put an order in the past, 7 days. Are you calling about the order status? And like, just kind of going through this, very proactive recognition and providing you with what seems to be the most reasonable reason that you're calling, and giving you an answer for that. And then we started we did some dabbling with returns as well. And I don't know if they're using that right now, but we had a great user journey for doing a return on the telephone with AI. And I'm sure there's somebody out there doing it, but at the time we were doing it, we couldn't find anybody doing it.
Yep.
And so I think those were really, really successful. In my current role, we're looking at similar use cases as well
Yep.
as some incremental ones. And I think what we're learning is, in some ways, AI technology has blown us away with what it can do. So as you start outlining a journey,
Yep.
instead of programming and code and all, we literally used a paragraph of just text. It said, create a consumer journey for me that XYZ. We outlined it, and we hit enter, and it actually created a user experience visually in front of us about how the different pieces would interconnect, where there were decision points and stuff. Like, we were blown away. And then the consumer experience, in some cases, particularly as you're playing around with um, order status, those seem to be working really well. And other things where, like, maybe you're trying to work on a product with a consumer, and you're like, hey, can I use AI to do that? The answer is, I think you can. I think in the marketplace, people are telling you, like, yeah, you can use AI and solve with self-service, maybe a troubleshooting type of case. But I think, again, you have to be really thoughtful about, okay, if the consumer has a problem, let's just say with a blinking light on a product, and the solution is like a 16-step process, you can't really do that really well over the phone. Maybe you need to text them a link to that knowledge article. Or so I think that we're still learning a lot when you get into the more complicated ones. But I think my experience with AI is really simple, clear use cases, and don't try to solve everything with AI. I think there's still a deep need for people to talk to people about what they need.
Yep. I think that's great advice you got from this large software company. We see that with, we work with hundreds of customers, and unfortunately, some of them have had battle scars with trying to flip the switch overnight to say, hey, maybe even 10 years ago when chatbots came out, or maybe even longer than 10 years ago, hey, CEOs and boards saying, use a chatbot, it'll save us a ton of money, go do it. And then you tried implementing it overnight, and there was a lot of battle scars from that. So this time around, you can see from, as we talk to large enterprise customers and who have complex processes, it's almost like what we call a crawl, walk, run kind of game plan that they have in implementing AI. And like you just said, exactly, hey, let's pick 1 or 2 use cases, let's get some success there, then let's build on that. And that's how we go from a crawl, walk, run approach that can implement AI successfully for our organization. So we're definitely seeing that. So that's great that advice that you got, and seems like you're executing towards that. So that's great.
And Joanne, I think
The
if I could add one thing, I think you've seen this in your work as well. I forgot the kind of the foundation. Always allow the consumer to get to a human easily, basically one step, like representative or whatever it is, to get out of these kind of these structured experiences. I think the most successful companies are the one that solve for all the unknown by just saying, hey, just say human and I'll connect you to a human. I think the
Yeah.
ones who really get into trouble are the
Yeah.
ones that don't provide you those outs.
Actually, you know what? That's great you said that, but I've always thought about this. Why? Because even me, and I know why I do it, but I'm curious what you think. Like, when I get on the phone, I just say human, zero. I press zero, human. But, I do humans really want to just talk to a human, or is it more like a lack of the right solution? Because you also hear the other side of the story, like, hey, no one wants to talk to anyone. They just want their issue resolved. But to your point, I do exactly what you just said. When I call a number, I just press zero. I just press human because it is ingrained in my mind that, hey, if I go through something else, I'm going to be running around in circles.
This is like a weird topic for me because the minute I think I know, I find out I don't know what I'm talking about. So I've always worked with the understanding that the reason people want to talk to a human is, look, humans generally rarely say what they actually mean, right? So there's like the words you use and then what the intention, and there's always this difference between the two. And so I think that is the fundamental of why people say, "Oh, just give me a human." They know what I mean versus what I'm saying. And so I
Yeah.
think I think that's still there. And I think to the other point is sometimes you're just not these self-service solutions, whether they're a voice bot or a chat bot or like a guide somebody can follow, that sometimes those are just so poorly executed. People are just like, oh, that's just too frustrating. Give me a human. And I think that when I look at a lot of data, uh, at least in my current role at SharkNinja, we really try to make data-driven decisions. And so we have a ton of info that we'll sift through before we try to make key big decisions. And one of them is this topic of like, do people really want to self-serve?
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, all the data I have, and we have a lot of it,
Yeah.
tells me they do. And even in areas where I don't, as a team, like my CX team, so when I say I mean CX for Shark Ninja, even where we don't maybe have the best self-service solutions, one of
Yeah.
the things we hear about the most in our surveying is, why did I need to talk to a human? Could I have just done this myself? And so I really do think, and this isn't true globally in every marketplace because my experiences, particularly at Marriott, indicate different markets do have different expectations. But particularly, I'll just say in Western Europe, the US, Australia, Canada, that generally people really do want to self-service. They're happy to self-service, just like
You know
in the
what?
travel industry, they're all happy to carry their bags, right? Like, I don't know why, but they do.
Yeah, yeah, you're exactly on point. We see that all the time. Yeah, so I think that's an area that we're seeing changing dynamically in real time, where the consumers want a self-service, but then being able to implement the right self-service solution is being adopted more and more. And it doesn't mean you replace a human; you still have those humans, and they do maybe different types of complex use cases. But definitely more self-service is being adopted. We're seeing that. That's great. In your role, Ted, how do you stay relevant? You've been a leader for a long, long time. What do you do to, help you continue evolving? What does work for you?
It's connections to professional organizations, whether I'm just a participant like CX, Leaders in the Know. It's a couple of advisory groups that I'm on as well for CX organizations. So Concero does great work. Frost and Sullivan does great work.
Yeah,
And I think just being connected to them
the
really
community.
keeps me always in the know. And I think
Yeah,
particularly with the CX world, it's always being connected with technology because again, you have to, the days of you can do everything over the phone are long gone. We all know that. But
yeah,
the solution isn't a single solution. So whether you're talking AI technology, case management, telephony, it's just always being connected to that technology piece has been huge for me. But it's interesting, John, because I think the biggest thing for staying connected is just listening to our frontline CX advocates. They will tell you more in a 2-hour session then you're going to gain from everything I just went through. They're going to tell you
Yeah.
what consumers are saying. They're going to tell you where your systems and your processes stink. They're going to tell you what they read about for some new technology. It's amazing. You sit down with the CX advocate and they start talking to you about like
So do
things
you
you've
go to
not
the
heard.
call center and talk to different folks? Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
sit with
so tell
them.
me about
Yeah.
I saw your post some time ago about culture creep. That gets into that as well. So, that's a very powerful post. I think every CX leader or everyone in CX should read that. It makes sense and very well written. So yeah, so tell us about that. Like, so are you learning about like culture creep when you're sitting down in these meetings with your frontline folks at these different call centers, or and then how you're addressing them?
Yeah, I mean, in our current world, we have roundtable discussions at SharkNinja with our frontline and tier two leaders once a week. So there's always a
Once a week.
sampling from
Wow.
our, yeah,
Yeah, it's
from
amazing.
different groups that we're getting feedback on, and that feeds into these kind of ongoing conversations. And then my ops team have, I think they're doing it right now once a month, these kind of more formal
Yeah.
sessions as well. But again, all of those are through teams. We're scattered all over the globe, and you get great insights. But when you visit, you get the best insights. And there's kind of two ways, right? You pull frontline and tier two and tier three and managers into a room and quality people and training people, and you talk to them, you learn a lot. You learn
Yes.
all the things you probably didn't want to know plus. But where you get the most phenomenal is when you're just sitting there quietly next to a frontline CX advocate and listening to their calls with them, and then just chatting with them in between calls. And the most amazing things become crystal clear to you. And that to me is where you learn about culture creep, where there's a QA person who was maybe a bad hire, who's been really influential at changing the dynamics of the organization. And all of a sudden, your people are rushing consumers off the phone and all of these things that you're like, wait a minute, I've been working for 3 months trying to figure out why my CSAT went down and my NPS went down. And you find out it's like a QA guy at an office
Yeah.
in Spain. And you're just like, how did that happen? That's the creep. That's the thing where all of a sudden you're like, these day-to-day things start influencing your business. And unless you're out there touching it, you have no idea what's driving it. And so hiring the right leaders, I know we all know this, I'm just emphasizing, is like so paramount, because that QA person in my example, or that trainer, or that frontline supervisor is really influencing the service that frontline person is giving to consumers.
That's awesome to hear. I mean, it's awesome to hear that, you've got these leadership views, but also you're ready to get in the weeds and, sit down and listen to your folks. And you're 100% right. I mean, you can collect some information through these weekly meetings, but when you sit in front of them eye to eye, you gain that trust, you gain that respect where they feel more comfortable to sharing information they otherwise would not have shared in a
Yep.
survey or in an anonymous form field document they filled out. So you as a
I think
leader
there's been
too.
about I think there's been four of us, Juwan, who have visited the contact centers regularly in the past 6 months. And we pulled all of our lists together, the list of all the things you learn, and you find out it's process and policy and all of these things and systems. We had 100 entries on our
Wow.
list of things that
Yeah.
we were following up on. It was
Yeah.
that powerful. And they weren't all problems. Some of them were like, give great recognition to Jawan for doing like, but there were 100 different things that were follow-up worthy. And I think that is the kind of the proof here of like how powerful it is to listen to your frontline
And,
people.
and it's probably, one is that is great, Ted, because you guys have a caring team, right? So you have people who are willing to give you that feedback. When people stop giving you feedback, then you're like, whoa, what's going on? So that's great. And number two is you've got to document it, and now you're reviewing it. And, some you're taking action, some you may not, but now at least it shows your frontline team that you guys care. They care, you care. That's a great setup. That's a great setup to make magic happen. So that's awesome. I know we're coming up on time here, Ted. Appreciate all the time you've given us today. Tell us a little bit about what you do outside of work. I know you're a busy man, even on your day off here. You're catching up with emails. I know we're chatting about that before we got started. What do you do? Are you into pickleball yet? What's the deal? What's going on in
Uh,
Kansas City? What do
hey,
you what do you do as a hobby outside of work?
pickleball's a big deal in Kansas City. Like it's a big deal. And I stink at it. And I've played twice. And I
Yeah.
needed to like take the day off the next day. I really
Your
realized how
back
old I
hurting?
was.
Because a lot of people who don't play much pickleball, they bend their back instead of bending their knees, and your back is sore the next day.
It was a little bit, it was bizarre. It was my legs. My legs were like killing me the next day. I was like, what on earth? But so I don't look to pickleball as kind of like my main outlet. Travel is probably the big thing. Again,
Travel.
it's why I got into the travel industry when I was young, but I
Yeah.
love to travel, and we have
Any
a
specific
trip to
places, or in the US or international? What are your, favorite spots?
yes and yes, but favorite spot is Italy. I we go again in April. I think that's our third trip in 2 years, and I would say that we both are happy to say we're stuck on Italy right now. We've had the opportunity to see a lot of the world and a lot of the US inclusive, but and we have
Yeah.
lots of great places we want to go. But for some reason, I don't know, like Italy's our thing. Yeah.
Really? That's okay. So I gotta so I'm a big fan of gelato. I love gelato. Everyone's been telling me that you gotta go to Italy. So I haven't been there yet. I've been to other parts of, Europe, but I gotta get into Italy. I'll keep you posted.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to do gelato in Italy. You're right, Joan.
That's great. What, you got any big trips coming up this year?
Yeah. April, Italy. And then that's probably the only other big one I've got.
Great, great. Well, excited to share this podcast with you. Ted, appreciate you taking the time. Amazing insight. Your experience. That's really interesting to hear you talk about. Hey, coming from the hospitality, service-oriented world, and how that influences you and how you think about customer experience. It makes a ton of sense. It's a huge benefit for consumers that use your product. And
Great.
so, thanks for sharing your knowledge. Before we wrap up, any advice that you would give to a younger Ted or someone who's just getting their career started now, and they're thinking about CX, they're thinking about consumers, leave us with something that, gets us fired up.
I think if you're passionate about the consumer, that it will serve you well, regardless if you stay in the CX realm, if you work in a contact center, if you're at a corporate job, or even if you want to go into marketing or work in social media or revenue. Like, I think if you're passionate about the consumer, you cannot go wrong.
Well said. This is great. Well, Ted, thank you. Thank you so much for, being with me today, and I look forward to catching up offline.
Thanks, Joanne. Appreciate it. Take care.
Great.